Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell. Prepare for a parade of pensive performers pontificating profoundly on the purpose, power and peril of provoking peals of public laughter. The professional purveyors of punchy patter take a perspicacious plunge into the peculiar, paradoxical and profoundly preposterous practice of professional punchline peddling. I'm the comedy nerd who's seen more than 2,000 different comedians perform live comedy, and you can find out more about my journey in comedy fandom on my website, thecomedynerd.com. Please also take a moment to like, subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode is an award-winning Australian-born comedian, writer, presenter, and creative force. Now based in the UK, she's best known for her wildly original paper puppetry stand-up style. A craft-based comedy that went viral and landed her spots on 8 out of 10 Cats Does Countdown and The Jonathan Ross Show. She's hosted her own children's arts and crafts TV show, Make Away Takeaway, co-hosts hit podcasts including Problem Squared, and her one-liners regularly top best joke lists from major outlets. It's comedian Bec HIll. So I usually start at the very, very beginning. Do you remember comedy being influential on you when you were growing up?
Can you imagine if I was like, no, no influences whatsoever. Came to me fully formed as an adult. Yeah, I think like most comics, it was very prevalent in my life. I remember watching a lot of stand-up. Well, I say a lot. Whenever there was stand-up on TV, which was actually quite rare when I was growing up, it'd be like the Melbourne Comedy Festival gala or the televised comedy debate that was on during the Melbourne Comedy Festival. I grew up in Adelaide in South Australia, and there wasn't like a huge amount of like stand-up wasn't really a job, right? You know, when I was growing up, there were comedians and they would find work elsewhere. Like I was very familiar with the work of Will Anderson, and he ended up co-hosting the breakfast show on Triple J, which is a channel over there. And I remember listening to that like all throughout high school whenever I was going to school and stuff. So I was very aware of comedians, but I only sort of saw them on TV or on radio, and I had no idea how they got there. Yeah. My parents are sort of big comedy fans, so I remember them. I watched a lot of Dave Allen videos growing up. I remember my parents quoting a lot of Billy Connolly to me, and I've mentioned this on several podcasts, and you know, I mention it because it really tells you a lot about the time. Yeah. But I remember listening to the same Bill Cosby tape on repeat while we're on long car journeys for family holidays and stuff, because you know, separating the artist from the art type of thing. He was an incredible storyteller. Yes. And I remember just thinking that was fantastic, and but not having any idea about how you went from not doing it to doing it. Not like there was a drama, you know, there was drama schools, but there weren't like comedy schools. It wasn't clear how that happened. Yeah. So it felt like this really like magical thing that some people get to do, but like absolutely no path to how to get there. Yeah. I'm delighted that you brought up Dave Allen there, because absolutely one of my favorite comedians. Of the thousands of comedians I've ever seen perform, absolutely adored him. But he was banned in Australia in the 70s, I think. I wasn't aware of that. I know that he was very much not. They didn't like him in Ireland. Yeah, he was really popular in Australia, really, and he was given several TV shows. So I don't know what in the early 70s he was considered too rude. So they said he couldn't play in Australia. But obviously they relented later. I mean, he definitely did. This sounds like an early version of like, oh, you've been cancelled. And that means absolutely flip all. Like no one is ever cancelled. Yeah, because it certainly didn't affect his very big Australian career. So I don't think there's such a thing. So you said about there not being a way in sort of to comedy, everything, it was more of the drama. What was your path into comedy? How did you come to? I started going, so there was and there still is, a stand-up venue in Adelaide called the Rhino Room, which was kind of like Adelaide's version of The Stand, or probably The Stand is like the best kind of like, except there's just one, you know, they didn't like branch out to other cities. And that's kind of like the only place where there was stand-up comedy, like regularly or like accessibly. You know, there might have been the occasional gig happening at various like hotels and things like that. But in terms of a regular club where local acts could start working on their stuff. I can't remember how I came across it. I think a friend had told me about it. And I remember going along when I was 16. I would have still been in my school uniform. I would have like gone into town straight after school, hung around, got some food, and then gone to this gig. And because the bar was in a separate room at the time to the rest of the comedy, I was never told off or never like, I think I probably started changing outfits at some point because it was a dead giveaway that I was underage. But my friends and I would sort of go along, and we'd go to the local nights. I think it was Wednesday nights where they would have, you know, folks trying out stuff, and you'd start to get an idea of who the local acts are and everything. And that was sort of when it started to become slightly more accessible. You know, these people that I was watching, they weren't on TV, they weren't touring. Occasionally there'd be acts from other cities who came along and did a headliner spot. But the ones, especially at the New Material nights, that was when I was like, oh, this is accessible. It's not a job, but it's accessible. And you start to make friends with the regulars and that kind of thing. And there's a comedian called Justin Hamilton who is very much, I mean, I would argue, a comedian for everyone, but is so highly regarded by other comedians. Like I watched that man last year. I watched that man tell a half-hour story about a vinyl record that he ordered from Amazon that went to the wrong address, and him contacting customer services to find out where it was and go to the various places to try and get hold of it. I watched him tell that story for half an hour and was enthralled. And nothing big happens. It's just the way he tells a story. Like, he just knows how to, you know, it's probably reminiscent of the same, he's not the same, but it has the same effect as early Stuart Lee did. That sort of the ability to tell something very mundane in a way where you're on the edge of your seat. And he's incredible. He's from Adelaide. He'd moved to Melbourne. I think he's in Sydney now. And I just thought he was brilliant. And also he wasn't, his style was quite inclusive. You know, there was a lot of comics. It was heavily male. You very rarely saw a woman on stage, if ever. And a lot of the time it was very much like, you know, either about wives and stuff, or it was about like just being a bachelor or a fella kind of thing. And Justin Hamilton would just have these stories of I remember he had a whole set about his favorite scene from the remake of the Dukes of Hazzard, like the that film that had God, I can't even remember who was in it. I want to say Owen Wilson's in it. I can't remember.
Thinking Owen Wilson, yeah.
Yeah. And he had a favorite scene from that film, and he would just reenact that scene. And you would be enthralled. It was incredible. And I just found him very I don't know, just kind of like opened the door slightly to like stand-up can be slightly more than what I have been shown so far.
Yeah.
And I remember going up to him after, I must have been at 17, I think, after a gig, and just saying like, you know, asking, how did you get into it? How did you get into stand-up, and how do you do it? And he gave me loads of advice, and then and I told him I was thinking of doing it. And, you know, once I finished school. And he said, once you finish school and you start doing it, email me and I'll give you some recommendations of like, you know, gigs and stuff you can try. And so I finished high school. I entered into the raw comedy competition, which is like our So You Think You're Funny. And I emailed him and said, "Oh, I've entered raw comedy," and he sent me a bunch of really great advice, like 2 bits that I still tell people today who are just starting out, where I say, and it's really practical. It's rehearse your set, because when you start new, you're used to watching people who've been doing it for long enough that they don't need to rehearse. They know their voice. They can go up and sort of like blag it a little bit. They just need to roughly know what they're talking about. Yeah. But when you're brand new, you don't have your voice yet necessarily, especially if you're really young. And a lot of people would be like, "Oh, my mates say I'm funny. I'm just going to go on stage and be funny." And then they get on stage and realize, I don't have any material. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm doing. And so he told me to write some jokes, rehearse my set, make sure it was to time. That was another thing. He was like, when you're starting new, it means so much. Like, you will do so well if people know they can rely on you to stick to time. And he was not wrong. Like, people will happily rebook you if you stick to time, and people are excited to see you come on stage again if you have not overstayed your welcome in the past. And it is the easiest way to build loyalty, both from promoters and audiences. It's such a simple thing. And as an ADHD person who struggles with time management in every other aspect of life, it has been miraculous that this one space, I sort of wasn't gigging as much more recently. I'm sure we'll get into that later, but I've started to gig a bit more. And actually at the last new material night, when I was given a very, very short amount of time, I took a timer with me on stage, because I was like, I'm not like a proper little, thing that goes ring, because I was like, I'll miss my watch. And I was like, I need to know, because it's been so long since I've just had to do a tight 5 of new stuff when you're not entirely sure of how long it takes. And but of course that meant that when I was finished, people went, "Oh, why didn't you go longer?" I'm like, "Because I did my time. Like, you can come see me again, and then you can see the rest of the set." So that was really good advice. And the other was to when you're rehearsing, practice holding something for a microphone. And again, that is like just basic first timer, like you're starting out advice that was life-changing just for that competition, because rehearsing at home with your hands free, you're moving them around, you're gesturing, but you get on stage, you have to hold a microphone, and you're not used to holding a microphone. I mean, you'll see this all the time when you go to weddings and there's someone giving a best man speech who has never had to do that before, and they just wave their hands around and you can't hear them because the microphone keeps leaving, or they don't hold it close enough to their mouth, and you're like, ah! And just rehearsing, holding it just below your mouth and talking into it as you're rehearsing just meant that as soon as I got on stage, I felt so comfortable, because I knew what I was saying, and I knew how to stand, and I knew how I was gesturing. And it meant that everything else looked after itself. The big things that normally throw you off were sorted, and left me space to do the jokes to the best of my ability at the time. And so I did really well in the competition. I got to the state finals. I didn't make it to the national finals, although the following year I did. I made it to the national finals. And like there was a wild card as well that also got into national finals, which we never heard of again. Someone called Hannah Gadsby. I don't know if you've ever experienced this person. The national finals that year were phenomenal. And the fact that I was amongst that lineup is wild, because like, I'm not going to do myself a disservice and be like, I'm not like, I know that I have like, I feel like my sense of abilities, especially at that time, were pretty reasonable, but I was amongst giants. Like there was Hannah Gadsby, Celia Piccola, Tom Ballard, like just this, everyone on that bill either went on to like find massive success, TV shows, specials, radio shows, the lot, big tours, or you never heard from them ever again. They just disappeared out into the ether. Like they never kept going. And then somewhere in the middle is me, who was like, I've had some success. I haven't disappeared. I'm around. I've held my own. But that was so, like, in huge thanks to Justin Hamilton, who, after he actually ended up being one of the judges that year. And it was quite good that I didn't, the first year, and it was quite good that I didn't get through to the national finals, because that would have probably felt a bit like a conflict of interest. But he came up to me afterwards and he said, like he was really complimentary. And I was like the youngest person there as well. Everyone else was like 20s, 30s, 40s plus. And I was 18, and he said, look, I don't want you to take this as a sign that you're not good enough. And the person who had gone through ahead of me to national finals that year, Rob Hunter, had already done the competition the year before, and was so ready, was so ready. So I didn't feel bitter or sad or anything. Like, I could see why I didn't win. Yeah. But he said, I think you could do really well. And so he ended up basically mentoring me for the next sort of 2 years, where I would get to do support for him, and he would each time like watch my 5-minute support before his show. And then afterwards he would be like, oh, you changed this. Have you thought about doing this? Like, and I took that for granted. I took that for granted so hard, until like years later I moved here and had to sort of essentially start again, and then was like, oh, that's not normal. Like, especially in light of all of the horrible stuff that happens. Like, it really feels like the balancing, because it's interesting, but with all the predatory nature of stand-up that has come out, and certainly, like, I have experienced it. I would argue any female comic who started around the same time as me has experienced it to some degree. And I'm not going to go into it because, my goodness, I don't have time. There's too many things to talk about with comedy. I was unaware of the predatory nature until much later, when I started to sort of put things together and realize, like, hang on, because there were a lot of people where, when they first started out, like when they were just babies, would have these horrible experiences. And luckily for me, I'd been going a little bit longer, so that when I had these experiences, they didn't put me off comedy. Right. They were unpleasant, but they didn't ruin it for me. They just made me go, okay, I need to be a bit more careful in these areas, or I need to look out for this, or I need to avoid those gigs, or whatever. Yeah. But, when people are starting out and they're experiencing that, they don't know enough. They don't know, that they can talk to others or reach out or whatever. They didn't know. And there are a lot of comedians that never got a chance because of that sort of experience. Yeah. And I remember thinking for a long time, oh, I never had that. I've always found, I was really supported, and I was, for a long time, the only woman doing stand-up in Adelaide until I moved to Melbourne. Yeah. Or at least regularly doing stand-up in Adelaide. And it occurred to me that people like Justin Hamilton and Craig Egan, who still runs comedy, Adelaide Comedy, and does stuff with Rhino Room, both of whom I would say are like my comedy big brothers, like they just absolutely have been protective without being patronizing, very much like, I think they saw a lot of my potential before I could, and probably still do to a degree. But they were so supportive, and Craig really wanted to get more women doing he wanted stand-up to be a lot more diverse, and understood that doesn't happen unless there's people doing it, so that when other people come along, they go, oh, I can do that. And I think because I was just so young and excited by it all, I didn't think like, oh, there's no other women, I can't do this. I was just like, oh, yay, I can have a go at this. And he saw that and went, okay, good, we can start building. And I said to Craig later, like, there are a lot of people that I ended up, that I now know were like very predatory, and I never felt unsafe around them. But when I think about it, I was never left alone with them.
Mm.
And essentially found out that a lot of the time those, you could say, oh, don't book those people. But again, different times, and also there weren't as many comics, and it was harder to get people to come out and come along to stuff if you didn't have big names. But I found out that, there were people who were taking these people aside and saying, like, you behave around this person like they are a baby. Do not mess it. Or just making sure that I'm not left alone in that space, or offering me lifts home when, because I wasn't the big party type, and then going, do you want to get, like, making sure I got home safe so that then the wild parties could begin, like, just looking out for me.
Yeah.
But in a way that I couldn't see. I didn't know they were looking out for me to that degree.
Yeah.
And I said, it was either to Craig or Justin, but I remember saying to one of them, why didn't you tell me? Like, why didn't you say, like, don't be around this person, or don't? And they said, because why should you have to worry about the stuff that the other comics don't?
Yeah.
That's not your responsibility. You shouldn't have to be worrying, because you're a woman, that you've got to look out for this, because no one else does. They just get to sit there and think about their sets.
Yeah.
That's not conducive to comedy. You shouldn't be sitting in a green room worrying about that when you should be going over what jokes you're going to do. And it just, like, to me, like, that's an ally, like, it's all very well being like, I'm an ally, I do that. But, like, an ally is someone who just goes, this isn't fair. How do we make it more fair, rather than just, like, passing the problem on?
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for it. So that's a very long way of saying, like, the way that I got comedy was through very kind people who gave me a chance. Yeah.
Yeah. But you went in well advised and well prepared to doing comedy. And aside from obviously the predatory side, which you've very neatly summarized what that's all about, are there any other major surprises that you encountered about what it meant to be doing live stand-up comedy?
Well, I think for the longest time it just wasn't a job prospect, but I knew that it's all I wanted to do. And it was the only thing I'd gotten excited about. When I left high school, I mean, there were several options that I thought maybe I could go into. I think I got into a social sciences course at one of the universities to, like, look into maybe getting into counseling or something, or becoming a therapist. I almost went to a Bible college because at the time I thought that maybe I wanted to be a chaplain for, like, teenagers and stuff. Although then I decided against that because I figured there were a lot of kids that had been through a lot more than me, and there would be I would encounter them in that job as well. And I wanted to have enough life experience so that if I were to be a high school chaplain or something, where kids would come to me for, like, to talk about stuff that was affecting them, that I could have the tools to listen and help with that, rather than just sort of guessing based on my own very limited experiences. So I was like, no, I think I need more life experience before I try and take on any advisory roles. And so then I ended up I said, I'll take a year and figure out what I want to do, but like a gap year. And that was when I entered the Raw Comedy competition, and just it was the first time that I'd gone, oh, I know what I want to do. But it wasn't a job. So I was like, well, it is like an addiction, because you're like, what do I need to do to keep this up, to keep this habit up? How can I? So I just, began my illustrious career with entry-level jobs for quite some time, lots of customer service roles, hospitality, just whoever would take me. And I did all sorts of jobs. It was a door-to-door salesman. I did obviously all the bar jobs, worked at a bowling alley, video games arcade. I was a travel agent for a very short amount of time. Lots and lots of online customer service once there was that sort of big website boom, especially when I moved to the UK, and you've got the Silicon Roundabout with Old Street and all of the startups opening up. So I was doing a lot of that just to kind of support myself while I made shows and wrote, and that's all I wanted. That was, that was the dream. I've completely forgotten what your question was.
I was asking about anything that surprised you about the reality of performing live
surprised
comedy.
me. Yeah, the reality of it. I mean, the reality of it was surprising when I could make a living from it. Because I wanted to desperately, and I was always looking for a way. I think I quit my day job like 3 times, thinking, oh, this will be it. I'll get discovered at this Edinburgh Fringe, and then I won't need a job. And then I would go back and have to find a new job. And funnily enough, it wasn't until I had it was still customer service, but I worked for a company that were really great. They really cared about their staff. They really cared about their customers. It's very easy to do a customer service job when you're working for a company that genuinely cares about its customers, because then you're the good guy. Then your job is to genuinely help people rather than find ways to not make the company culpable. And I loved it, and they'd been very understanding and supportive of my stand-up. And it got to a point where I thought, right, I'm going to see if I can go part-time, so that because I was starting to get more and more gig offers that would require me to travel or, just get in the way of work. And so I sort of asked if there's any chance I could go to part-time. And they said, oh, we were going to ask if you could take a promotion, which would definitely not be part-time, but we think that you could lead the team. And I realized that if I said yes, I would never leave. And that was hard because I liked that job. Yeah. I did. I liked the people. I got along with them, but it wasn't what my heart wanted. And in the end, I said, well, I guess I have to quit then. And luckily, they had a little pop-up shop, in-person shop at the time, that they did actually need a few casual shifts in. So they gave me some casual shifts just while I was getting on my feet. And that gave me the soft landing I needed to get to a point where, okay, I wasn't making, I didn't have a steady income, but it gave me the space to create so that occasionally things would come in that would allow me to then keep going and then just slowly build from there.
Yeah.
That was a surprise. I never thought that would happen. I'm still surprised to this day. It feels, I'm very grateful, and I feel very spoiled by it, because it's, this is the 21st year since my first stand-up set back in Adelaide, and it can be very easy to forget how much work and effort and luck went into being able to do this as a job. And I say this, the majority of my money doesn't come from stand-up. It comes from stand-up adjacent stuff. It comes from, which is why I heard Will Anderson doing Triple J breakfast in the mornings, or saw people on TV, or that's why everyone who was so successful that year at Raw Comedy went on to do these. Yes, they tour. Yes, but unless you are, packing out stadiums and just touring solidly, it's just not a reliable source of income. And obviously lockdown proved that. And it's tiring. It's really hard. I love performing live. I do. But, I look at all of my friends who have come back, finished tours, and they're just exhausted. And I think, I think stand up feels more like a way of life that then opens up doors to other ways of making money that doesn't get in the way of your way of life.
You mentioned Edinburgh. You've done Edinburgh many, many times, and of course, other festivals. What's your festival experience been like? There was a hiatus recently, and then you came back in 2025 with Guess Who's Bec? Brilliantly titled, of course. How has your Fringe experience been over the years? How has it changed? Has your relationship with festivals changed? And what's the story from the going away and being back?
Yeah.
Being Bec.
Yeah, it's a big question. For a long time, again, it sort of fell into that thing of like doing festivals and writing shows. It's not even, I wasn't even, the thing is, there was never any thought that went into it. It was just a given. It was a given, like, what's the next show going to be? And the thing is, whenever I wrote a show, I would be performing it at a festival and then would think while performing it, oh, I know what my next show is going to be about. I know what I want to do it on. And as soon as that was done, I might do a couple more shows of it and then I would start writing the next show. And so I would do Fringe maybe like definitely once every 2 years, sometimes a couple of interim ones as well. And it's funny, I had friends comment where they were like, this was before I'd done much TV or anything, but they said, when I had friends who'd be in Edinburgh with me and they're like, you're a celebrity in Edinburgh. And it felt like being in like the final year of high school where all the kids at school like know who you are and you're settled and you know all the teachers, you know everyone and you just feel like just a part of it. Like this is your world. And Edinburgh, I always felt like this is my world. I'm top dog, like not in a egotistical sense, but just in a like I belong here and nothing you could say or do would convince me otherwise. And it just felt, it was always a non-brainer. It was never a question of like, oh, should I do it again? It was like, when am I doing it again? And what's the next show? And how am I building that? Where am I previewing it? All this. I was always so motivated. And in my 2019 show, which was called I'll Be Bec and was about, I started to, so funny. I do flip charts for anyone who's unfamiliar with me. I do these like little sort of animated, like real life animation, like paper, I call it paper puppetry, flip chart things. And I remember putting up a video of one I'd done for dinosaurs for Jay Foreman. And I think I put it up during Fringe one year to try and like promote my show. And it had been in the show the year before. And so I was like, oh, I can put it up. It's already been, burnt. And it got like, I think like overnight, it got like on YouTube, like 20,000 views. And at the time that was huge. Like this is before TikTok. This is before like everyone was online. Like, I don't know if you remember, but like there were days where 20,000 was like, whoa, move over. Like that was big back in the day. That was very noticeable. Like, I think it got picked up by a couple of like, Fringe press things on a slow day, just going, oh, have you checked out this new video? And that was when going viral. And I realized 20,000 does not sound viral, but when it's 20,000 of people in the same industry, like that is a lot. And it had effects. Like it put me in front of TV execs and people in the, in content creation and writing and all this stuff. Like it put me front and center of a lot of people who weren't familiar with me or my stuff. It actually had an effect, unlike now, where it feels like it just gets lost amongst the ether. I had that real, people started coming to see my show because they'd seen that video, but it wasn't in that show. It was in the previous show. And for me, that was a real like ding moment of like, oh, because what would happen is every time I made a thing that involved being filmed or felt nice as a video, I would then put it on YouTube once I was done with it, just as an archive. And then I had this moment of like, oh, wait, this can help promote me. So after that, I remember doing a misheard. I'd done a few other flip charts, and then I did a misheard lyrics to Non Je ne regrette rien by Edith Piaf. And I remember making it and just thinking at the time, this is going to go down nicely. Like this is going to, sometimes I get feelings with flip charts and I'm like, this is going to go well. And I filmed it and I put it online and it did really well and helped me sell the show that I then had it. And I had it as my big closer, like it was the ending. And then I realized that I really struggled to think of like, what will my next flip chart be? Like, how do I top that? And it was making me feel really sad because I was like, oh God, have I peaked? And I would do gigs where people would come up to me and they'd be like, oh, that Edith Piaf thing is so funny. You're never going to make anything funnier than that. And they would be saying it with a laugh, but I was like, oh, far out. Is that the case? Like, am I done? Have I peaked? And then I remember like rocking up to a few like shorter gigs where, because, you have to have like, the stage has to be good to put up a flip chart and the sound you have to have sound and all that. So sometimes I'd rock up to gigs without the flip chart because it just made more sense. And I would see people's faces be like, oh, she doesn't have the flip chart. And then I was like, oh no, I'm not funny. The flip chart's funny. And then just really started to question it. And then, so the 2019 show was, I got the idea for it like years and years beforehand, but this idea that I wanted to do a show where the show is interrupted by me coming from the future telling me to stop doing comedy and the way that would play out. And as I got closer to building that show in the background of doing all my other shows, it then sort of, I sort of realized that it was about the fact that I was like, I don't know if I'm going to get any better. Like, what if this is it? And what if like all of it was for this? What do I do? And then it sort of started to pull in all the other things that were making me very paranoid about just the world in general and the direction we were heading. I also want to say that in that show, I pull out what we now today recognize very clearly as a face mask. But in that show in 2019, I pull the future version of me, pull one out of my pocket, and I explain that in the future, everybody is wearing these. Now, I say it's because of air quality and the pollution, but the next year we were all wearing them, and I've never felt more like a soothsayer. And it was a big show. It was the first show where I think I was really, truly airing out all of the things that I'm nervous about and the things that people often come to my shows to forget about, right? Like they don't want to hear about capitalism and potential dystopias and stuff. Like they come for butts. They come for really silly stuff. And I had to try and find a way of like being true, like working through these feelings and this fear while also delivering something that is just as lighthearted and silly. And as I did it, I realized it was so exhausting to do. It was both exhausting in terms of like physically, because there was a lot of like, I don't want to ruin it, but there is a body double involved. There involved a lot of like running around and quick changes backstage. There were a lot of things that could go wrong. I needed multiple people. That show was a real team effort. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. It ended in lasers. Like it had a lot happening and a lot that could go wrong. And coming from someone who quite often just does their own effects using paper and cardboard and things to have actual lasers that could go wrong was hugely stressful. And so I enjoyed putting it on, and I appreciated all the audiences who came to it, and it sort of echoed with it. Really, they responded to it. But I remember thinking afterwards, like, this is not going to be cost effective to tour, nor is it going to be like, it doesn't make sense on a logistical level, but also it was exhausting mentally because I was having to just relive those fears every day and play out this conversation, this internal conversation about like, where are we heading as humanity? Where am I heading as a performer? What am I going to do? Am I a good person? Are we good people? Are we all stuffed? And that I needed the show in order to sort of air that out. But after a while, you're then just part of the cycle. You're just like reliving that conversation rather than moving forward with it. And I was just like, oh, okay, this is not my big breakthrough. Like, this is not the big show that gets everyone's attention, but this was like, I needed this. But it was the first time that I finished a show and had no idea what to do next. Like, I just was completely clueless about where I would head. And it was the first time that I did a show and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And so then I decided I would rehash an older show and tour that instead, which was really silly and playful. And I was trying to work out how I could tweak it so that it wasn't the exact same show and it had enough like different stuff going for it. And then lockdown happened. And then, you know, everyone's got that same sort of story. All the stuff that they had lined up all fell through. And I was really, really lucky, partly because I was really not looking forward to touring. I wanted to do a 10-date tour, and I had been very active with all of my followers online to find out where they wanted me to go and where I could have a decent sized audience. And I came up with 10 places, and then my agency, who were really good, but they got a tour agent in to help, you know, tour producer to help manage stuff. And he managed to get me booked into like 20 other venues with guarantees. And the thing is like, when there's a guarantee, you're not going to turn down definite money. Like, that's money. But at the same time, I knew for a fact, like, if I get an audience there, it's not necessarily my audience. And that's like a lot of these dates, I suspect I will rock up. It will be a very small audience, if at all. I will end up apologizing profusely and feeling awful and feeling grateful that I'm getting paid, but at the same time be like, you know, I'm sorry you're paying me for not bringing an audience in. And I just knew that my self-confidence didn't need that. Like I'd rather do a short tour to people who want me there, you know, at least to start with, at least until I'm at a point where if I'm performing somewhere where people don't know who I am, I'm going to be of a level or like in a space of mind where they're still going to come, like an audience will come, enough of an audience will come that I don't feel bad to the venue. And so I felt very relieved that I didn't have to do a tour. I felt bad for the audience members who were really looking forward to it. And there's a lot of people who'd bought tickets and the tour kept getting moved forward and eventually cancelled. And I did feel really bad for that because people did want to see me, but I wasn't ready to be seen or I didn't want to be seen at that time because I was sort of going through a bit of a crisis of confidence as well because I was like, where am I going with this? What am I doing? And then the lucky thing that happened was I got a production company pitched an arts and craft show for kids with me as the host based on some auditions I'd done for them for a different show that didn't happen. And it got commissioned. And so suddenly I was living one of my many childhood dreams, which was to basically become Neil Buchanan. And so we were prepping that during lockdown so that once some of the things were lifted, we could start filming. So that then became everything. That became my life on top of I got a book deal. I pitched a book of short horror stories for kids to a publisher, and they came back and said, we don't do anthologies at the moment for kids, but we think that these could make like larger books of themselves. Could you turn 3 of these short stories that you've sent us the premises of? Could you turn 3 of them into full-length books? And when there's a lockdown and you've never had a book deal and you don't know what's happening with your career, if a publisher says, can you write 3 books? You say yes. And I'm glad I did it. But I do wish that I'd stood my ground a bit more with some of the stuff because it was a real challenge to turn some of the stories into longer stories because they're meant to be short stories. That's how my mind works. I work best in short bursts. I'm not a marathon runner. I'm a sprinter. And so, yeah, I was writing the books and I was filming Make Way, Take Away. And that happened for a few years and took us out of lockdown and everyone started gigging again. But I was in the middle of those things. So I just did not have the creative energy to do anything else. And then I a production company wanted to turn the books into a live action series. And so began about a 6-month, possibly more, negotiation between my publisher and this production company. And we were having meetings with head writers, and everything was sort of scaling up to be, I think 2022 was looking to be, I think it was 2022, 2023. One of those years was like set to be like everything was going to be happening. You know, season 3 for Make Way, Take Away looked like it was going to go ahead. And then CITV closed down. And so Make Way, Take Away was done. And then because we'd lost a children's channel, the production company that we had the deal with the publishers, they bailed, got cold feet. And so the whole deal fell through. And suddenly I didn't have anything, and I didn't have a new show in mind. It was my version of lockdown, because suddenly everything fell apart and I didn't know what I wanted. The only thing that sort of really kept me going during that time, and look, I'm probably forgetting a lot of like really big stuff that happened. Like I'm probably not doing it a full service, but I think one of the things that sort of financially kept me going was I do a podcast with a mathematician called Matt Parker called Problem Squared. And, it doesn't, it's not enough to cover everything, like all my bills and rent and stuff, but it's enough to keep me afloat with other stuff that comes in. And so thanks to our Patreon supporters. So that gave me at least something. It was like the only sort of regular outlet that I had, creative outlet at the time. And I slowly started to work on new stand-up. And because I still had this reputation and I just had a TV show and the books and everything, and there was all the promotion that had gone with that as well, I was still getting like good opportunities. I was getting booked for TV spots and festivals and corporates. Like I was still getting bookings, but I was not at my best. Like I was not performing at my highest capabilities, which only then, because I wasn't gigging regularly and so I wasn't match fit. So I was then sort of coming away from these things feeling really down on myself, because I was like, I know I'm better than that. I know I can do better than that. And then because I wasn't feeling good about myself, I wasn't actively pursuing gigs or writing or things like that. And that's kind of been like sort of the underlying story since then. And then the end of 2024 going into 2025, I realized I have to write a show, because if I don't do a Fringe show, I'm never going to do this again. Like this is just going to fizzle out. And I don't know what to do otherwise, because comedy was always the one thing that I knew in my heart that I wanted. It was my driving factor. And without it, I felt like the last time I'd felt that way was like finishing high school and looking at the opportunities and going like, I have no idea what I want to do with my life. And then feeling like I'm back there again of like, what do I want to do? I don't know. And, part of it, what played into this as well was, and I talked about this in my show last year, was that at the beginning of 2024, beginning of 2024. So like almost 2 years ago, my husband, who I'd been in a relationship with for 16 years, and I decided to separate, and then, realized that we're probably like, we're not going to get back together. So we'll call it divorce. And it was very amicable. We were still living together while I was working out our own stuff. And I didn't know if I wanted to stay in London, because I didn't know if I wanted to keep doing comedy, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So 2024 was very much a year of like trying to work out what I wanted. I went to LA several times. I like just threw myself into various things. And I think I went to to Edinburgh just as a punter as well, to try and like remind myself of why I love it, which worked. And I think that was the moment where I was like, oh yeah, I have to do a show next year. Like I can't put this off any longer. But yeah, it was, and then I didn't know how to do a show because it had been, 6 years since my last one. And even then I'd written that one almost 2 years before that. I'd sort of started writing it in 2017. So I was really out of practice writing and trying stuff out and previewing and all the admin that comes with it. There's so much admin. Mark, I saw you. I did the New Year's gig, and I think that might have been New Year's going into 2024. So I think it was around 2023 to 24, and you asked me to do the podcast, and I was like, yeah, email me. And then my husband and I split, and I had this crisis, and I was like, the last person I want to talk to is somebody who wants to ask me about my feelings about comedy when I have no idea what they are. And I still don't, but at least I feel a lot more comfortable talking about it now. And so the admin, the everything, just like I had no idea how to do it. And I'm still like relearning. Oh yeah, that's right. This is the time where I get this email about this, and I have to come up with a poster. And I have a work in progress show in Adelaide I'm looking at the date. It starts in just over a month. I have not written it. I have not promoted it. I have not posted about it. I have done nothing to try and get people along. I know I will, because I learned my lesson from last year. Gosh, this is such a long way of answering the question you asked. Last year, coming back and doing the show, I was convinced that everyone had forgotten who I was. And I think I kind of wanted that as well. I think I had, and I still do this to an extent, I'd really isolated myself because I wasn't sure what I wanted or what I was doing. I didn't feel safe trying stuff and I couldn't trust what I was doing was what I really wanted to do. I couldn't, if people responded well to it, but I wasn't feeling it, I didn't want to then be like, oh, do I have to be this thing that I don't feel in my heart is correct? And just, I retreated and became very careful about what I said yes to and what I did. And the problem with trying to stay safe is that it stopped me from doing the things that make comedy great.
Yeah.
Like comedy is amazing because people don't play it safe, because they take risks. They try something weird and dumb. And that's where innovation lives. That's where the soul lives, is like in this place of like constant danger of like, but what if it goes wrong? What if I fail? What if it doesn't have the effect I want? What if I can't control? I mean, all of it, it's what if I can't control the outcome? Because that's what it is. Like we can't. It's a realization that we can't control the outcome. Yeah. We hope we know what the outcome will be, but we can't control it. And that's terrifying, and also where brilliance lives. And I stopped giving myself an opportunity to be brilliant, and I'm still like really struggling with it, because you think that once you've had it, like once you've been brilliant, once you've found that place, then it's yours, because we live in a materialistic society, which tells us that once you have the thing, you've got it, and then no one can take it away from you. But it's not like that. It's like exercise. Like you have to keep doing it to have it. And if you stop, you lose it. That's just how it works. You can't, it's not an award you stick on your wall. It's not a giant toilet seat for best toilet joke. It's intangible, That's what makes it brilliant. It's temporary. It's not permanent.
Yeah.
And so, I thought that by stopping, I was like holding on to this thing that couldn't be taken away from me. But I was like just losing it. Like it was slipping through my fingers. The more I tried to grasp it, it was just leaving. And then I didn't know what to do. And so I hid and was very careful, very scared. And then I was like, well, what do I have left to lose? And around this time last year, was gearing up for my first show. It was my first show at Adelaide Fringe in 11 years. Convinced no one would remember me, convinced no one would come. It was a week before the show started. I had a couple of set pieces that I knew would get me like 20 minutes or something, like would buy me 20 minutes, but like everything else was like, I have no idea. And then I just started writing an introduction on a, on a PowerPoint presentation, just explaining that like, this isn't a show. I've decided not to do a show because I don't have one. So everything you see, like I'm still going to try and entertain you, but it's not a show. So don't tell anyone like that you saw my show because it's not one, And so, and as soon as I took away like any expectations, like I sort of essentially said to the audience, like lower your expectations, like don't have any, then I felt safe enough. And I had to like basically lower expectations for the audiences and myself in order to feel safe enough to then just try to just throw stuff out there. And the thing that I still have to keep reminding myself was how well people responded to that. Even though it wasn't, especially in that iteration, it was not a great show. It was very much a work in progress. I still feel guilty that people paid full price tickets to go and see it when quite often there were moments of complete silence, right? Like there was still but at the same time, there were people who stuck around afterwards and desperately wanted to talk to me because I talk about how the divorce, the fact this was the first show I'd done without my ex directing it. Like he'd directed all of my shows. This is the first time I had a show without a director because I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go back to him. I didn't want to find a new one because that felt weirdly like it would be somehow cheating. And so it just like, not that he would feel that way, but I just don't know how to operate with a director who I'm not married to. And so I just, had all these people who wanted to talk and were supportive. And then I took it to Edinburgh and the responses were really, again, really positive. And I just realized like the power of being honest and authentic and just trusting that the audience will take what they need from it. And if they don't, that doesn't mean anything about me. If an audience walks away and someone thinks, oh, I didn't find that very funny, or that didn't speak to me, or I don't agree with that, or whatever it is, that doesn't make me worth any less as a human. It doesn't take away the work that I've done or what what it means to me, what I get from it. And in fact, I was talking to, I'm going to name drop here. I was talking to Adam Hills, who is a good friend of Justin Hamilton's and has, known me since Hamo was mentoring me. So he's kind of also part of the comedy Big Brother clique. And I was talking to him before Edinburgh and I said, this is the first time I've done a show where I'm not trying to tell the audience what they should think afterwards. I'm just telling them where I'm at. Yeah. And they can do what they want with that. It's a show for me. Like I wrote the show for me and people can come and watch it if they want. They can join me if they want. And then Adam said, well, then you've already won. You've already won Edinburgh. If you're writing it for yourself and you perform it, that's it. You've won Edinburgh. That's all you could ask for. And going into Edinburgh with that mentality of like, I've already won. Like there's nothing I can lose from this I had probably one of I would argue the best Edinburghs that I've had, purely because, it was still tough, but I felt firstly like I was getting something out of it, that all that money I was pouring into it wasn't just for the sake of like, oh, I'm paying all this money to entertain people. It was, or even just an ego boost or to try and get noticed or anything. It was like, I'm paying this money because after this finishes, I will know more about myself. Yeah. And I did. It also meant that I didn't want to perform the show ever again. Which is why I find myself in a position of going, I'll have to write another show now. But at least, there's space for it to be more silly. Yeah. And it doesn't, I've been able to work out a lot more of my, process a lot more that's happening in my life. And that's put me in a position where hopefully I can now take the risks and find the brilliance that sits somewhere between genius and absolute bollocks, wastes of time, because I miss it. I miss that, and when I find it, that's the thing that keeps me going.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll talk again in the future, and I'll be like, I found it. I found it.
Obviously, Bec, I want to talk to you about a whole load more things. I want to talk to you about your win at the Leicester Festival Best Kids Show. I want to talk to you more about your podcast. I want to talk to you about Makeaway Takeaway and paper puppetry, of course, the genre you created and made all your own. But obviously there isn't time this time, so we will come back in the future. We'll talk about that, and you can tell me about how you found what you were looking for. But between now and then, first of all, how can people find all about you and where they can come and see you?
Well, they can listen to this episode where they'll find out a lot about me. And when I do eventually get round to posting about the stuff that I'm doing, I am on socials. I'm Bec HIll Comedian, or Bec HIll Comedian if you read it wrong. But I do have a newsletter on my website, which is bekhillcomedian.com. I think it's on the contact me page. There's like a sign up for a newsletter there. And I very rarely send out newsletters, but pretty much there'll be like one around June or July talking about what work in progress I'll be taking to Edinburgh and how you can get tickets, etc.
And so we end then this episode with the final question, which is always the same. Bec, how would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
This is one of those things where I should have remembered to think about this at length before the record. I think all I can say is comedy in a nutshell is an integral tool that we as humans have at our disposal to help us process stuff. It makes the scary less scary.
Bec, thank you so much for being my guest. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks for having me.